We're going to continue on in the circulatory system. So the other day we left off at capillaries. So we're going to learn about capillaries today and finish out this chapter actually just for the lecture anyway. We'll be continuing this chapter for the rest of the week with other activities, but today we'll finish up the PowerPoints. All right, capillaries. What are they? The other day we briefly mentioned that they're very, very, very thin-walled. So there's something called arterioles and venules, which we said this was an artery, this is a vein. They always make veins blue and arteries red to distinguish between the two. It doesn't mean your blood is actually blue. Let me explain that real quick. So with arteries, they're a bright red color because those contain oxygenated blood, and oxygenated blood or oxygen-rich blood is super bright red. But then you have deoxygenated blood, which is represented by the blue here. And deoxygenated blood, or blood that's low in oxygen, is actually a really deep red. It's not blue. It might look kind of blue through your veins. If you were to look at your veins right now, like I'm looking at mine, they kind of look like a greenish blue. But that doesn't mean my blood is greenish blue. That's just kind of the color of your veins. Your blood is still red. All right, arterioles and venules. Arterioles are kind of the smaller ones next to the arteries. Venules are the smaller ones next to the veins. And then what connects those two are even smaller ones called capillaries. So arterioles and venules are connected by these microscopic vessels. So you've got artery, arterioles, capillaries, venules, vein. Vessels are small enough that red blood cells can travel through in single file. That's pretty crazy because red blood cells are super teeny tiny and they're flowing through in single file like this because those capillaries are so thin. Remember, they're only one cell thick, which is pretty crazy. 3 vessel walls are not perfectly sealed, so they leak plasma into intercellular spaces called lymph, and that's actually a good thing. We need that for certain functions in our body. Here is the anatomy of the heart. So we talked a little bit about the heart, how it's kind of backwards. So even though this looks like the left side and this looks like the right side, it's as if if I'm standing directly and talking to you face to face, your left side is my right side and vice versa, right? So this is actually the right side and this is the left side according to our heart diagram here. So our right atrium and right ventricle, this is the right atrium, this is the right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. This is how I remember which is which. So first of all, you have to remember which side is which. The right, it's always like the opposite. This is the right side, this is the left side. This is the atrium, this is the atrium, this is the ventricle, this is the ventricle. How do you know which is which? How do you not get mixed up? I always remember it because the atrium is on top. I have 2 ways to remember this. Atrium is on top, A comes before V, so it's like alphabetical. Atrium, ventricle, atrium, ventricle. This is another way you can remember it. The ventricle actually makes kind of a V shape. So you can see this ventricle makes a V shape, this ventricle makes a V shape. So these are the ventricles, which starts with V, they make a V shape. Now, the difference between your right atrium and right ventricle and your left atrium and left ventricle is your right atrium is receiving deoxygenated blood. Again, deoxygenated blood is always represented in blue. Our right ventricle also is receiving deoxygenated blood. The left atrium and left ventricle are in red because those are rich in oxygen. So they receive oxygenated blood from the lungs. Now this should make sense because when you breathe, that oxygen is going into your lungs, right? So it makes sense that our blood gets oxygen from the lungs. Here are some blood pathways. I'm not going to read through all this or make you read through all this. I just included this in here to show you that a lot of the different body systems are interrelated. So you have your pulmonary system, which has to do with your lungs. Pulmon in Latin means lungs. Systemic is going to take blood to and from the rest of the body. So our systemic system is like our whole body system. Lymphatic system has to do with the immune system a lot of times. But blood has something to do with all of these systems, even though blood has its own system called the circulatory system. Your body systems are all interrelated and connected and help each other out. I'm not going to make you go through all of these, but this is just going into more detail about each system, how it's has to do with circulation. So I just kept them in here because some of the pictures are pretty cool. But this is a systemic circulation slide. And then it goes into a little bit more detail about the brain and blood flow in the brain, called cerebral circulation. Systemic circulation has to do with your hepatic portal, which is like your liver, your spleen, stomach, pancreas, which are all here. You don't have to read through all this. I just left the slides in here. Systemic circulation, so renal circulation has to do with your kidneys. Lymphatic circulation. Other circulatory organs or accessory circulatory organs, so things like bone marrow, actually is where your red blood cells come from. Your spleen helps to clean the blood. How it does that? Well, or how does it do that? It destroys and removes damaged red blood cell fragments and platelets. So your spleen is kind of like your blood cleaner. All right, that brings us to the end of this PowerPoint here. Like I said, this is the end of the PowerPoint. Doesn't mean we're done with this chapter. We're going to have a lot of activities with this chapter coming up. So make sure you do the assignment today and pay attention in the next few days and the rest of the week for your assignments. Keep checking that Excel spreadsheet that tells you exactly what to do every day and what to do to be marked present.